Hello again, this is Preheat. Welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. Today we're going to be talking about Arcane Mage in patch 11.2 Season 3 of the War Within. Today's video will focus on Sunfury. We'll be covering the stats, gear, trinkets, talents, arcane basics, your opener, your cooldowns, the rotation and single target in AOE, and much more. If you're looking for one-on-one coaching, I do offer that on Metafy. Link will be in the description below. When it comes to Sunfury versus Spellslinger, there's actually very minor differences in terms of the overall damage. Sunfury has more execute, it has less funnel. Spellslinger is better on the funnel end, but has less single target. They're close enough where you can play both. They're both probably going to be viable, but Sunfury is easier to play in the sense that you only have to learn one rotation. It does basically the same rotation, single target, AOE. It doesn't matter the situation. There's just going to be minor differences. So I think for starting out as Arcane, if you're looking to raid or do Mythic Plus, it's great to kind of have them be the same to build up that muscle memory. All right, so when it comes to stats, Arcane Mage is looking for kind of a mixture, and as you get more secondary stats, they're going to start having diminishing returns, so whatever is your best stat is going to change over time. That being said, Haste, Mastery, and Versatility are going to be your best stats. Haste is really nice because it makes it so that we can maintain some of our buffs that we would normally have to manage a lot harder, like Arcane Tempo. It's just kind of automatic. Mastery is really great because it gives us mana regen. We're also taking Prodigious Savant, so that's extra mastery value there, and we're staying at 4 charges pretty much the whole time. So lots of value in mastery, and versatility is just really good overall. Makes you take less damage, just flat damage increase. If you're looking for someone to just tell you what stats to run, you can just look right here. These are the stats that I'm running currently, and these are working out pretty well for me. But obviously, the real answer is just sim your own character. Moving on from stats, we have our new tier bonus in Season 3, and that's going to be a passive damage increase. There's nothing really you have to worry about when it comes to your rotation on the set bonus. Just be aware that it is tied to your spheres. So if you die and you lose your spheres right before your cooldowns, or you start the fight without having your max spheres, that's going to cost you a lot more damage than the average player because you're basically starting without a tier bonus. It's increasing the damage of our character just at all times whenever we have these spheres. It's giving us a passive haste bonus. We're also getting an extended Arcane Soul window. So that's whenever your Arcane Surge ends, and then you're usually barraging until you get your clear cast, and then you're alternating between missiles and barrage. You're getting increased damage for every barrage there, and this is extending it by up to 2.5 seconds based on the amount of spheres your bird eats during the surge. Basically, it's always 5. Unless something goes really wrong. And then also, while we are in that window, right after Arcane Surge ends, we're going to have lesser time warp, so a slight haste increase, and we're getting 20% more spell damage. The culmination of this makes Arcane Soul almost like a proper cooldown. It's like an extension of Arcane Surge. Not quite as powerful, but it can be very potent if you line it up well in fights, especially if you are seeing a situation where there's going to be ads spawning soon, and you can maybe carry over your Touch of the Magi pop into those ads, and then you're able to basically enter your Arcane Soul window and blast them, especially in Execute. Does a ton of damage. And there's not really any other pieces we can mess around with aside from jewelry because everything's kind of locked in here. So let's cover it. The cloak, obviously we're going to be wearing this the entire tier. Our boots are going to be increasing the potency of the cloak. You get this from the optional Soul Hunters boss in the raid. We also have our belt from last tier, which is still very, very strong for us. And you're probably just going to wear this belt pretty much until the end of the next tier. Obviously upgrade it all the way. Mine isn't upgraded because it's on the PTR, but you're going to run crit in this most likely, but stack charge can also be good. Just submit yourself. If you get a mid-track belt that is fully upgraded, it will actually be better than this belt by a very, very small margin, a fraction of a percent. So probably not worth investing into that until you're just like way into the tier. We also have our embellish items, so that's going to be our Ascendance Offhand. Ran with the Cantrip Raid Weapon. We aren't actually getting the tier bonus here. We're just looking for the passive damage on it. And then on the Bracers, we have Riding Armor Bandy, which is going to increase our Ascendance. So we have that covered. And then obviously we have our 4 pieces of tier, which are locked. We already talked about those. And that really just leaves Helmet, Neck, 2 rings, and our Trinkets. And the Trinkets are also going to be locked in because we want to run the Ecodome trinket with the crazy name. This thing is very strong, and it's just a passive increase. You just have these mites coming out, and they're just giving you int all the time. Very, very powerful trinket here. And then the Ritual Forge, you're going to want to use this after Arcane Surge because you're getting a nice window of damage increase, but it does diminish. So want to basically put it up right as you're entering the highest peak of your burst. It does do damage to you. It's not going to be up for every Arcane Surge. You just use it basically every other Arcane Surge. There are other options too when it comes to trinkets. Obviously, the Sack Brood, very, very good trinket. You can run that one. We also have the Astral Antenna, another strong passive option. You can kind of just run whatever you want here, but yeah, the best options are the ones you see on your screen now. And then when it comes to jewelry, this is going to be how we kind of fix our stats if we're playing different specs. So different mage specs want different stats, but a lot of our slots are already locked in. So you're just going to be shuffling around your secondary stats, fixing them, so to speak, using the jewelry. And that's what I'm doing here. That's why my jewelry pieces are all just like mastery verse. I'm just trying to pump that number up. And then my neck is super high verse. But yeah, what you're going to have is going to be completely different because it's just going to be based on what you get to drop. Now, I expect there to be some trinket tuning. I would not be surprised because every caster in the game basically wants these two trinkets. So if you want the most up-to-date information on the trinkets, be sure to check out Porom's Wowhead guide on his trinket tier list. He's going to keep that up to date. And Wowhead is always a great resource to check it out. So just go there for the latest and greatest information. Moving right along, we have the raid talent build. So if there's ever more than one target, you need to make sure that you have this talent resonance. This is actually going to be a damage increase on the target that you're looking at if there's additional targets present, since it's buffing Arcane Barrage based on hits. And then if you're running single target, pure single target, you're just going to take this talent out and you're going to put it here into Energized Familiar. It's a very, very small difference in terms of your single target loss if you take this one out, but you're getting a lot of value in that cleave. And then you'll probably notice that this looks a little different than on live because we are running it down the right-hand side here with Prodigious Savant all the way down to Leydrinker. They buffed this talent, like I mentioned before. It's very strong now, and we are taking out Aether Attunement. That means that once we lose our current tier bonus, we're going to be able to clip all of our missiles, which is just kind of nice for consistency. But essentially, this is what we're looking at for the raid. When it comes to Mythic Plus, Magi's Spark is gone because we are playing the crab build. And essentially what's happening here is we're just dropping Spark to pick up Aether Attunement. That way we can get more Harmony damage. It just ends up being a little bit more damage than the standard build. But it's pretty fun to play, and you're going to basically play it like single target. Now, you will notice that I do have some talents picked here. These are utility talents like Remove Curse, Spell Steal. You may not necessarily need these. I just have them slotted in just in case. And then there is a conflict here because Gravity Lapse, it's really cool to run Supernova, but unfortunately our options here are kind of limited. If we pick Lessons in Debilitation, our bird can actually pull stuff that's out of combat if it has a buff on it. So there's going to be some dungeons where mobs have buffs before you enter combat with them, and your bird is going to be silly and spell steal them and put you into combat with them, potentially wiping the group. So we don't want to pick that. The problem, though, is if you pick Supernova here, it's going to give us a button that's kind of worse if you're hitting more than 5 targets because this is target capped. So it's kind of a judgment call. What I'm going to recommend you do is just pick Dragon's Breath, make this red and mad, and then that way you don't have to worry about accidentally pulling stuff that you don't mean to, and also you still have a stop that's uncapped. Of course, if you don't want to go that route, you can play Lessons in Debilitation. Just be careful. Make sure that whenever you pop your Arcane Surge, your bird is out of range of anything that has buffs. That way you don't wipe your group. Just to give you a visual representation of the trade-offs with each of these specs, we are losing very, very little single target, and we're getting a huge amount of AoE by increasing the step here from raid cleave to crab or single target to cleave. So just make sure that you're playing the one that's appropriate for whatever you're doing. If there's ever a second target, make sure you're playing the cleave build. In Mythic Plus, don't be afraid of how much single target you're losing in the crab build. You will more than make up for it in the amount of priority damage you're going to be getting through funnel. So in the most basic level, Arcane Mage has 2 resources. Arcane Charges are going to be how we amp up our Arcane Blasts and also our Arcane Barrages to make them do more damage and also cleave more enemies. But essentially, Arcane Blast is going to give you 1 charge. It's very bad at doing that, though, if your charges are low. We kind of want to avoid using Arcane Blast as a builder. Arcane Orb is a fantastic one, but usually it's not really needed. Whenever we are spending our charges, that's done through Arcane Barrage. Arcane Barrage gains a whole lot of damage per charge. It's going to depend on your mastery. As you can see here, mine says 152% additional damage per Arcane Charge. It's also refunded mana, and it's also giving us additional damage on those other targets that we hit. This is going to be primarily used whenever we have a refund. We are trying to stay at 4 Arcane Charges the entire time we're in combat, essentially. There are some weird edge cases where we might drop our charges, but usually we're going right back to 4. And then Missiles is kind of like a little bonus on top, right? Whenever we get this proc called Clear Casting, it looks like Apprentice, you're going to be able to use your Arcane Missiles. That's going to give you 2 stacks of this buff right here, Nether Precision. This makes our next 2 Arcane Blaster or Barrages do 30% increased damage. So in the perfect world with infinite procs, essentially the rotation would be Missiles, Blast, Blast, Missiles, Blast, Blast, over and over and over. But occasionally you would replace one of those blasts. So the case where we're going to mainly be replacing those blasts with barrages is going to be if we have a 4-charge refunder. That's going to be through Glorious Incandescence, which we get with Sunfury. This is going to be every 6 Arcane Blasts or Arcane Barrages, we're going to get this proc. And if we barrage with this proc, it's going to give us back our charges and drop a couple meteorites. Also, it will do a little extra damage on our Arcane Barrage. And we also have Intuition. Intuition is a damage bonus and a forward charge Refunder, just the same, but it's a little bit more damage on the Arcane Barrage side. Now, these two work differently. For Sunfury, it's going to be every 6 spells, because that's whenever we get a sphere. We basically get the precursor buff called Burden of Power. This is telling us that on our next blast, usually it's a blast, but it could also be a barrage technically. On our next cast, we're going to get the buff Glorious Incandescence. So if you're currently casting a blast and you have Burden of Power, you can cue a barrage from it, and that blast is going to generate a Glorious Incandescence, and the barrage is going to instantly consume it so fast that you don't even really see it. It hardly even registers, but it does happen, and you get a refund that way. Intuition is set to a counter. It says it's a chance to proc, and it does have a chance to proc early. However, the way this works behind the scenes is that basically it's counting your casts, and every 11 casts you're guaranteed to get an Intuition proc. I'm going to have a Weakaura in the description below that you can use to track that if you want to have better visibility on your Intuition procs. We also have 2 big cooldowns. That's going to be Evocation and Arcane Surge, and then one that we're going to use twice as much. So essentially, Evocation is giving us full mana. It's giving us one of those clear casts, so we can use the missiles for free. It's also giving us 1 Arcane Charge, and it's increasing our damage by 14% for 20 seconds. Arcane Surge is going to basically spend all of our mana and then give us a crazy buff that's going to increase our damage by 35% and give us essentially infinite mana regen. And this is also going to generate a clear casting and do decent damage. And then Touch of the Magi is going to accumulate damage over time. It's also going to put us immediately at 4 charges, and this is going to be the primary way that we go to 4 charges from 0, because on the pole, you're essentially going to use this like after your surge, and then from that point on, we should basically be set to 4 charges. Now, if you have 4 charges and Touch of the Magi is coming up, you should barrage before you Touch of the Magi. That way you drop your charges and then you get them right back. It's going to explode at the end and deal that damage to nearby targets. In addition to that, we also have talents that modify it, like Magi's Spark. Now, how Magi's Spark works is the first Arcane Blast, the first Arcane Barrage, and the first 2 seconds of your first Arcane Missiles are going to deal double damage in your Touch of the Magi. And once you've checked all 3 of those off the list, you're going to get a little mini pop before the Touch of the Magi expires that's going to deal damage in AoE around it. Because Touch of the Magi is half the cooldown of Evocation and Surge, we are essentially always syncing these 3 up whenever available, but we are going to use a Touch of the Magi in between. And you want to use that right away. You don't want to hold this thing. You want to keep them synced up. A big mistake you can make as Arcane with your cooldowns is desyncing your cooldowns. You don't want to do that. We also have Shifting Power. Shifting Power is going to give us cooldown reduction. We want to make sure this hits all of our abilities. We're using Shifting Power after our cooldowns have ended. Now, of course, there are more abilities, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to cover each and every one of them. Just open up your spellbook and put your mouse over and read the tooltip, and you should get the general idea. The only one that I'm going to explain, because it doesn't explicitly state it, is Mirror Image. This makes it so we essentially don't have threat while they're out. So this is a very good way to get started in your cooldowns without having to worry about pulling threat and then getting killed while the tank is kind of gathering everything up. All right, let's talk about the Arcane Opener. So before combat, you can get your mirror images out and put up your barrier. And essentially the idea is we want to evocate before the boss is pulled and start this Arcane Missile. And then as this missile is channeling, we're going to start mashing our next button so that it clips it on the global cooldown. And that next button is going to be Arcane Surge. So right here, we're going to Arcane Surge. That cuts the missile off early, clipping it. And then we're casting Arcane Surge into Touch of the Magi. And this is also going to be where we pop our Trinkets, Potion, all sorts of steroids, stuff like that. So as the Surge is ending, I'm going to Trinket, Potion, Touch of the Magi here at the same time. Boom, boom. And then we're going to go Blast, Blast. Since I have 2 Nether Precision, Missiles, Blast, Blast, Missiles, Blast, Blast. And I'm just looking to see if I get one of those 4-charge Refunders. Right here at the very end, we're going to be saved because we get that barrage. It does come late sometimes on this first one. It's much easier to hit this with Lust. Obviously, I'm not popping Bloodlust here, so it was kind of down to the wire. I ran at the target to make sure the barrage hit in time. But that barrage is important because that's going to proc the Magi Spark right before the Touch of the Magi ends. So our checklist is completed. Here's a boom, right? And then there's a second boom. There's the Magi Spark Explosion and the Touch Explosion and the barrage damage. Okay, and then for the rest of Arcane Surge, we're just going to continue the same rotation. Basically, we're just using missiles, and then Blast Blast, or we're doing missiles, Blast Barrage, missiles, Barrage Blast, missiles, Blast Blast. It could be any one of those. It just depends on if you have the 4-charge Refunder or not. And you're just continue along until your Surge is about to end. And then usually as my Surge is ending, I like to barrage at the very end. That way I'm paying attention to when Surge ends and when Soul begins. And then the first goal in Soul is going to be immediately get to 3 clear casting. So I'm just going to barrage until I hit 3 clear casts. Once I'm at 3 clear casts, I'm going to alternate between missiles and barrage. And it's going to be missiles, barrage, barrage, missiles, barrage, barrage, missiles, barrage, barrage. And basically our goal in Arcane Soul is number 1, get some good damage out because of barrage, but number 2, we want to exit with 3 clear casting. That's why our last cast in the Arcane Soul is always going to be a barrage. Even if you don't have another precision on it, just make sure that you end with that. And then after your Arcane Soul ends, so here's my last global, I get 1 last barrage in there, boom. After that ends, we're going to go ahead and go for a shifting power, but first, I'm probably going to use up whatever procs I have if I have stuff that's like about to expire. So right here, I missile and then barrage just to get the Glorious Incandescence out. Shifting power, get our full cooldown reduction. And then we're just going back to the normal rotation, which is blast into missiles. And I'm going to be blast, blast here. But Touch of the Magi is coming up, and I want to use this right away. So if I have 4 charges and Touch of the Magi is ready, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to blast into a barrage. So right here, I'm going to do it. I have intuition proc, so you're not going to see my charges drop. But essentially, we're looking to barrage into touch here. And you can see there that the first barrage is already proc there. And then we're going to do a blast. And this will turn our Burden to Power into Glorious Incandescence, right? So this blast is going to be into a missile, since I have a missiles here for another precision. You'll see on my UI, I have this Weakaura, and it'll be shared in the description. I call it the Cheeto. So if you have the Cheeto, what that means is that you have a 4-charge Refunder, okay? The Cheeto is good, but you know what's even better than the Cheeto is a Flaming Hot Cheeto. So if you press your missile here, and it's tracking it so that if I'm casting blast and I only have 1, it doesn't count, right? Because this blast is going to eat this one. So if I missile here, so this missile here makes the Cheeto Flaming Hot, all right? And now if we barrage, we have Glorious Incandescence and another precision. That's an additional 20% on top. That's how we want to set this up. Now, you don't really want to go fishing for these, or at least too much out of your way fishing for these. However, there's a very, very small gain to holding the Glorious Incandescence if your Touch of the Magi is coming up soon. We're talking like sub 0.3%. So it's like very, very small. However, there are other reasons why you might hold on to a Glorious Incandescence or an Intuition proc, even though Intuition's very short. Primarily, you'll do this if there's like AOE that's happening soon and you know that. If you can just wait just a little bit longer and then get the extra barrage. Barrage is really good in AOE, so it's nice to do that. But generally speaking, you just kind of want to send it with whatever you have. But of course, if you have the missiles, put out the Nether Precision first, add the Flaming Hot to the Cheeto, and then you're going to have more damage. And so I haven't really been mentioning it too much, but my intuition counter is going down, and I am paying attention to this too. So just like blast into missiles here. You can see I have intuition, right? So in this case, I'm missiling and I have an intuition proc and I have burden of power. So it's going to be a barrage, right? Because this first barrage is going to eat my intuition proc. The second barrage now has Glorious Incandescence. It's going to eat Glorious Incandescence and another precision, right? 2 in a row there. So it can line up that way. Now, also, I am paying attention to my, so like right here, I didn't have another precision, right? No clear cast, no way to get it, so I just sent the barrage. But I'm also paying attention to my Leydrinker. So in AOE, that's going to be more important just because you aren't just like constantly casting blast. You don't want the Leydrinker to expire, so make sure you put out a blast whenever Leydrinker is out. But essentially, this is the rotation in single target and AOE. The only difference would be in AOE, if you have more than, let's say, 3 targets or 2 targets and execute, you're going to drop a barrage even if you don't have a Refunder, and then orb afterwards to get your charges back, okay? There's also another case where you might have to barrage if you go out of combat for a bit, like you're AFK, or maybe you just don't have enough haste. It is possible for your tempo to expire. Let's see if it ever came close in this. I'll go back and find one. Okay, so like right here, you can see right before this Touch of Magi, see my little tempo tracker? The way I have mine set up is it appears at 5 seconds, and I'll refresh it if I'm about to go into cooldowns there, because it takes a long time to get through your evocation and your surge. So I want to make sure I have it fresh. I don't want to drop my tempo charges right before my cooldowns, right? But if this is like about to expire somehow and you haven't barraged in a while, just go ahead and barrage even if you don't have a Refunder, and then you just orb afterwards to fix it. So essentially, in between our cooldowns, we're just kind of waiting on this stuff to come up while not going If you ever go out of mana or you're just going to go ahead and barrage, and then you're going to use an Arcane Orb afterwards to fix your charges. If you don't have an Arcane Orb and you've already spent your clear casting, you can just use Arcane Explosion. It is better than Arcane Blast below 2 charges. Also, if you have a 4-charge Refunders, you can just use a barrage even though you don't have 4, and that's going to bring you right back to 4. But mana shouldn't be an issue if your stats are fine, unless you have just like a crazy amount of haste or you're getting lust or PI, stuff like that. But remember, whenever you're entering your cooldowns again, right? So like right here, it's about to happen. Evo's coming up in 3, but Surge is coming up in 9 and Touch is in 11, right? Because I did, on the pull, I did Evo into missiles. So if I were to just rip the Evo as soon as it comes up, that's going to desync my cooldowns a little bit, because then I'm going to have to wait on my Surge and my Touch, right? So you're kind of looking at all 3, not just the 1. And essentially what you're looking for is like by the time you evocate into Surge and you have your Nether Precision already prepped, either you missile before the Evo or after, you're able to barrage into Touch here if you have 4, or just press Touch after Surge if you have anything less than 4. That is the timing you're looking for. Now, generally speaking, you want to use your cooldowns on cooldown, and if you don't, you're going to run out of mana. So there are exceptions to this, of course. If there's going to be some sort of big damage amp, you can plan around that. Perhaps use Touch of the Magi on the pull and then Surge later, so that it maybe syncs up your big cooldowns easier. Also, if you're able to hold on until the damage amp, you know, a lot of these bosses in this raid coming up have big damage amps. It can definitely be valuable to try and time your cooldowns with that damage amp. Just keep in mind, if you're holding it for AoE, you probably don't want to have your cooldowns happening exactly as the AoE starts. You probably want to have them lead it just a bit, and that way you can catch the tail end of your first Touch of the Magi while you're in Arcane Surge as the AoE is spawning, get a big pop on it, basically have a lot of damage front loaded into that AoE so that you can try and steal as much damage as possible. Remember, AoE is a zero-sum game, and you do get funnel out of AoE, so you're trying to grab as much of it as you can, right? Then that way, if the ads don't have much time to live, you're going into your Arcane Soul window where you're primarily spamming Barrage, so you're going to get a lot more funnel damage out of that, and also a lot more AoE damage as well. All right, so we're going to show an AoE example here, and I'm going to assume that in this scenario that the tank is still gathering the mobs as things are starting. So obviously, if you're late to the punch and you need to just immediately get into your damage because everyone else is already going, then you want to do the same opener that you saw in single target where you're doing the Surge into Touch without having to build any charges ahead of time. But let's assume that you have plenty of time beforehand and you wouldn't have popped your cooldowns here anyways. If you want to make use of the time before things are all grouped up, since you have mirror images out, you don't have threat, right? So you can actually throw out a couple barrages here just to get your tempo stacked, perhaps even get some clear cast procs, right? And then right before you want to go, you can throw out the orb and then Evo. And then as that Evo is ending missiles, it's going to be the same opener here, except we're going to barrage into Touch. So as the Surge is ending, we're going to pop our Trinkets, Potions, and then we're going to barrage into Touch here. And then afterwards, we're doing the same rotation, except if we have Arcane Orb available, we're going to try to make use of that by getting an extra barrage in. Also, we're going to full channel the Aether Attunement missiles, right? Because in AoE build, the crab, we're going to have the AoE missiles. So if you have these, you're full channeling it, unless you're in Arcane Soul. Don't do it in Arcane Soul. All right, so anyways, missiles, and then... So anyways, missiles here into Blast, into missiles. Here's going to be Blast into Barrage. Missiles, Barrage, and now we're in Arcane Soul. I started at 3, so I'm just going to go ahead and start doing the alternating right away. Just got a lucky clear cast at the very end there. Okay, so now that our Arcane Soul has ended, we do have just a little bit more time until we need the shifting power. Remember, you want to be shifting power in kind of like around 16 seconds on your Touch of the Magi, but we can cut it pretty close if we're good with it. So I'm just going to go ahead and use up whatever procs I have here. So I'm going to Blast here to get the Leydrinker and another Precision out into missiles. Right here, I can barrage because I have Orb, right? Orb afterwards. And then I can use up this last proc, and then I need a shifting power right away. Now, this is because I have another Precision still, right? If you don't have another Precision hanging over, it is going to delay your Touch if you do it like that, right? So don't cut it as close as I did here. I'm just a little bit used to doing this, but I'm going to shifting power and use Touch into, or barrage into Touch here, like as soon as it ends, right? So here's a barrage into Touch. And then that gives us Leydrinker back. So we're going to missiles here, and then we're going to do a blast into barrage because we have the orb, right? And we're going to orb afterwards. That brings us back to 4, and then we're just kind of doing our normal rotation again. And yeah, this just continues, right? It just loops over and over and over again. So the main things in AoE, it's like you want to pay a little closer attention to your Leydrinker. You want to make sure that you use those up before they expire. And remember, Touch of the Magi is going to replace it, right? So you don't want to munch it too. Clear cast is the main way you get Leydrinker. So generally, if you're using the missiles, it's like good, you know, if you have the ability to like do a blast into barrage, that way you consume the Leydrinker. But of course, you're still just mainly following the priority of trying to get as many barrages off as possible. Just try not to waste the Leydrinkers too. And yeah, in Arcane Soul, just clip all your Aether Attunement missiles, It doesn't matter if you have Aether Attunement or not, but outside of Arcane Soul, try to full channel those missiles, otherwise you would clip them on the GCD. So just a couple other things for Mythic Plus. Obviously you're using orb a lot more, so just be mindful of like the direction you're facing. You don't want to have to delay an orb because you have to like reposition your character. Know where you're looking, know what's behind your target, know if it's safe to orb, always be in a position where it's safe to orb. And then also try to play kind of like mid-range. I would say like right here is kind of good. But obviously the distance to your target impacts like your travel times. So travel time on stuff like missiles, travel time on stuff like barrage. With Aether Attunement, there is a slight value if you're like further back, because if you were to like barrage after the Aether Attunement missiles, then basically all of the missiles are hitting, you hit your harmony stacks, right? And you barrage there, and then you still have missiles in flight, which are going to give you more harmony, because you're always going to overcap on your Aether Attunement missiles, right? It always gives you like too much arcane harmony. So your distance can definitely be a factor. Just kind of play around with distance and see what makes the most sense for you. But yeah, you can see here like with this missiles, right? Instantly capped at 20. So like if I was further back, I would have more time to try and get a barrage out here, but obviously I don't have a 4-charge refunder, so I wouldn't do that, right? Orb is kind of like what's deciding if you can go for those extra barrages. And remember, this is like true in raid too, right? You don't have to be playing the Mythic Plus build. If you're playing the raid build and you have AoE spawn, you can definitely just save your orb for that, right? Because you're not really using orb too much unless you just like either refresh your tempo or you're out of mana. So like weaving in an orb whenever there's AoE situations is definitely going to give you a nice little damage bonus. But anyways, that is going to be it for today. So if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more of my content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you're looking for one-on-one coaching, be sure to click the link on Metafy, and hopefully I see you in the next one.